Buckeye fans? Dave Biddle, Patrick Murphy here from Bucknuts 24/7 Sports. Big day on the beat. Ryan Day has announced the Buckeye starting quarterback. It is CJ Stroud. Not a big surprise. We were wondering when Ryan Day was going to make that announcement. He did just about 15-20 minutes ago. Called a impromptu press conference sometime yesterday, late afternoon, early evening. We were wondering what it was going to be. They named the captains yesterday, so we thought it might be that. But then we thought he might be naming the starting quarterback, and he did. It is CJ Stroud. Again, Patrick, not a big surprise, but it's cool to know who the Buckeye starting quarterback is going to be now.
For sure. And, we talked last week when we did this, expecting CJ Stroud to be named the guy. Ryan said last Monday that, CJ Stroud had separated himself from Kyle McCord and Jack Miller. So, you got that sense then, and even before, with what we saw in practice, even going back to the spring, CJ Stroud taking a lot, if not all of the first team reps that we saw. So not a huge surprise, but yeah, now this is out of the way. Ryan Day was just asked about, kind of relief of having this done. And he said it was more, knowing that you have a guy that can go out there and lead this team. But I certainly think getting this decision out of the way is also a relief because, it's now something you don't need to worry about. You can focus on getting CJ Stroud ready for that Minnesota game.
If you're wondering what maybe allowed CJ Stroud to win this job, it sounds like a myriad of factors. He's a leader. Patrick asked about that. He's been a good leader. I think the biggest thing for me, just from reading between the lines, is he's done the best job of moving the ball down the field consistently. He might not have a cannon, but he's got a strong arm. He can make all the throws. He's accurate. And again, he makes good decisions and moves the ball down the field. I think that's what enabled him to win the job. Again, there's many, many factors at play, but why do you think CJ Stroud won this job?
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, you go back to the spring game, which is the closest thing we've seen to a live football game that he's really been in. I know he came in a couple games last year, but, he was able to run that offense very efficiently. Of the three guys, he was the best in that day. And that's only one day, but I think that's a sample size of what Ohio State has seen, what Ryan Day's seen, what Corey Dennis has seen from CJ Stroud in practice. Some of the videos you've seen, the throws he's made. If you saw on Big Ten Network last week, Garrett Wilson was asked about the three quarterbacks. He talked about the way C.J. Stroud can drop a deep ball in. He compared him to Russell Wilson, which is not a bad guy to have a comparison to. So that's a big thing. You need to be able to run this offense, move the ball. And Ryan Day said Kyle McCord, Jack Miller, two guys that need to continue to develop. That there are things that he talked to them about that need to get better for them. And that's not to say that CJ Stroud is a finished product, because he's not. He's just the furthest along, the best to lead this team offensively.
Yeah, and Ryan Day was asked, do you have a backup quarterback? Now that you've named your starter, do you have a number two? And he stopped short of naming a number two. He said Kyle McCord and Jack Miller are still battling that out. I found that interesting. No surprise there. It took him this long to name Stroud. I'm sure Ryan Day knew all along that Stroud had a really, really good chance of winning this job, that he was his leader. He wasn't going to tell us that Stroud was the leader, though, entering camp. I bet Ryan Day knew that Stroud was his leader. I bet he knows who his number two is, but he wants to keep that competition going.
Yeah,
what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that, like with the starting quarterback position, it makes sense to not, single one guy out as the number two. Obviously the kind of elephant in the room now is, does one of these guys consider transferring? And Ryan Day was even asked about that and didn't really give an answer. He just said, it's about focusing on development for those two. And Quinn Evans, who we can touch on as well, but specifically Jack Miller and Kyle McCord. You want to keep some sort of competition. Obviously, if something happens to CJ Stroud, one of them is going to have to go in the game. If you don't name a number two, if it's not necessarily obvious, if they're battling every day, that keeps them engaged, right? And we've seen, and Ryan Day's brought it up a number of times this fall camp, 2014, three quarterbacks. Braxton Miller didn't get on the field, but was the starter going into the season before he gets hurt. JT Barrett, Cardale Jones, the rest. So, you hope that doesn't happen and you're healthy throughout the season, but you need guys to be ready. And I think that that's kind of the message to these guys. And also, Ryan Day, and he did this with Justin Fields. He said he's the starter for the Minnesota game. And he did that, Justin Fields, after he arrived his sophomore year. He said he was the starter for the opener that year. Obviously, Justin Fields never relinquished that job. I don't expect CJ Stroud to. But, if CJ Stroud struggles, there's a lot of competition behind him, talented guys. Justin Fields didn't really have that until these guys got here last year, and by then he was already a Heisman Trophy finalist. But, if for whatever reason, and again, I don't expect this to be the case, but if CJ Stroud does struggle, there's some pressure behind him. Not that he needs to be looking over his shoulder, but there's an opportunity there if that were to happen.
If he did look over his shoulder right now, I think he would see yes. I think that's CJ Stroud right there. Yes. I was just watching Jack Miller get some extra work in. I think that's CJ Stroud right there. So maybe he will look over his shoulder. Hi, CJ. Congratulations. He wasn't looking. Quinn Ewers, you touched on this. Yeah, I'm on record that unless we see a 2014 situation with two quarterbacks getting hurt, not just one, two quarterbacks ahead of, maybe three quarterbacks ahead of him getting hurt. I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to see meaningful snaps. I think they're going to find a way to get him playing time. He'll be the fourth string quarterback, but there's going to be some blowouts this year. It's going to be a full season. I think we will see Quinn Ewers play, but I think it's going to be in the fourth quarter of blowouts. With again the caveat being, if there are injuries to guys ahead of him, then everything could change. What are your thoughts on Quinn Ewers this season?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Ryan Day said he hasn't practiced the last couple of days, been unavailable for a physical reason, he said, didn't give any more information than that. But, that's an unfortunate start to a young freshman's career. Only has been here since the beginning of last week. But, yeah, I think you're right. Probably try and get him into games if you have the opportunity. But if you have both Jack Miller and Kyle McCord here, Jack Miller's played in 2 games, hasn't thrown a pass. Kyle McCord, obviously a true freshman, hasn't played in a college game yet. So you want to find time for those guys to get reps as well. Obviously, Quinn Ewers is special. I have to think that there's been some conversation about, look, you came in late. We're going to get you. We know that they are indoctrinating him into the program slowly, but it's going to be a process for him. And, my thought with Quinn Ewers is let's look to see what happens going into next year's offseason. If CJ Stroud obviously lights it up and is a Heisman Trophy finalist or whatnot, then, he probably locks down that job. But if not, then maybe you have a little bit of a competition. And that's where I think it really gets interesting for Quinn Ewers. If you see him this year, I think that's a bonus because you're seeing him probably late in games, unless, like you said, it's a disaster and all 3 quarterbacks are hurt for some reason or something along those lines.
ever said anything to Jerry. It's funny you said that. Like, the only time I've ever said anything to Jerry about